Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the rolling forested hills around Mountain Aire Lodge, about 5 miles from the edge of the eastern slope of the Canadian Rocky Mountains. The town of Sundre has been the subject of a few bear attacks on our channel and is only about 50 miles to the east. Near the lodge, the elevation varies between 4,000 and 5,000 feet, with rolling hills covered in stands of Doug fir, lodgepole pine, and white spruce mixed with quaking aspen and balsam poplar. Grasses and shrubs cover the ground, granting shelter and privacy for animals and humans alike. The climate here is a montane climate, which means winters are cold and snowy, and summers are mild and moist. The abundant wildlife here includes moose, deer, elk, and bighorn sheep. The predators roaming the brush include wolves, cougars, black bears, and grizzly bears. Don Peters was a 51-year-old resident of nearby Calgary and an avid outdoorsman. He hunted this area often and was familiar with the animals and the terrain. On Friday, November 23, 2007, Don had planned a weekend of elk hunting, with a return time of no later than 2 p.m. the following Sunday. Although he was going rifle hunting, Don preferred to dress head-to-toe in camouflage. Most rifle hunters prefer to wear hunter orange to ensure they're seen by other hunters, but Don had different ideas about it. Even Don's boots were camouflaged, just so you understand how seriously he took not being seen while he hunted. The area around Mountain Aire Lodge was thick with trees, but clearcuts were made by logging outfits. Once the timber is harvested, the patchwork of man-made meadows, surrounded by interconnecting stands of forests, creates an ideal location for predators to hunt. But Don wasn't the only predator hunting these transition areas on this day. After arriving at his hunting spot, Don built up a platform from deadfall logs and constructed a blind to conceal his location from animals passing by. He placed his gear in his blind, and from there not too much is known about what happened on Don's hunt. By 2 p.m. on Sunday, one of Don's friends, whom we'll refer to as John, became concerned about him. He wasn't the kind of person to say something and not do it. Perhaps Don had bagged a big old bull elk and was still packing it out. John hopped in his truck and decided to drive up to Mountain Aire Lodge just in case Don needed some help and to allay his own fears. John drove around the area that he knew Don frequented, and it wasn't long until he found Don's truck. It was well into the evening time by then, and John got an uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. He immediately called the authorities and reported Don's disappearance. By early morning, November 26th, the RCMP and search and rescue teams were combing the area on quads, snowmobile, and horseback, searching on the trails and roads. Aircraft were searching for Don, flying in grid patterns, hoping for some kind of signal fire or other sign. Searchers on foot covered the brushier areas that the machines and horses couldn't get through, but none of them found Don. Given the time of year, the search for Don was turned up a few notches. The snow that had fallen was beginning to conceal any sign of him, so they knew it was now or never. A grid was set up and a very intensive ground search was executed, and was successful on Wednesday, November 28th. But the results were not what they'd hoped for. Don's body was discovered, buried beneath a large spruce tree, crammed behind a couple of logs. Snow had been piled on him, along with duff and dirt from the surrounding area. It was a clear sign that a bear had claimed his corpse as food, but wasn't conclusive proof that a bear had killed Don. Hunting is a rigorous activity, and it isn't too rare that a hunter has a heart attack or some other health emergency while in the woods. I've had friends die in the woods myself, and they were far too young to have it happen to them. If Don had died from a sudden health problem and the bear had come along and consumed part of his remains, then it would not be a case of predation. Don's body was gathered up and taken to medical professionals for an autopsy, while the wildlife officers investigated the evidence at the scene of his death. Not too far from his blind, investigators found Don's hunting rifle. It had been discharged and still contained the empty brass in the chamber. They searched the area around his rifle and found no blood trail, so they believed he'd missed whatever he was shooting at. All of his belongings and gear were still where he set them in the blind and were undisturbed. That's when they found some very telling evidence that cast a completely new shadow over Don's death. Grizzly bear tracks were found near Don's rifle and told a story that would be later confirmed by the coroner's autopsy. A curious fact that the investigation revealed was that Don's body was located only 200 yards from his vehicle, but his blind was a couple of hundred yards in the opposite direction. They wondered if he was trying to return to his vehicle to retrieve something he'd forgotten, or if he'd been searching for a new location to construct a blind when he was ambushed. Perhaps he was pursued to the location where his body was found. The broad area where the evidence was deposited provided a confusing and difficult situation for investigators. Before departing Don's attack scene, investigators carefully charted the locations of his gear, the path the bear had traveled, and where Don's body was located. They gathered bear hair left near his cached carcass, hoping it might come in handy, and already believed a grizzly bear was the culprit. Grizzlies hibernate later than black bears do, so it isn't as likely that a black bear killed Don, but analysis of the hair would reveal the facts soon enough. After gathering the data, it was all analyzed by wildlife officers. Given there was no animal cache nearby, they dismissed the bear as having attacked Don in defense of its own food. The track evidence revealed that the bear had stalked Don in a predatory manner before killing him, and they had the DNA evidence to tell them precisely what grizzly had done it. With a grizzly who had stalked and killed a person, the authorities closed the area and set out culvert traps. Although it was late in the fall, they hoped to trap it before it went into hibernation. The winter set in before their efforts brought success, but they had another plan they would implement over the coming months. By spring, Don's death was still on the minds of the public and the authorities. Culvert traps were once again set out near the site of Don's mauling, and now the waiting game had begun. It wasn't long before a grizzly sow and 2 yearling cubs were caught in the area on April 5, 2008. DNA samples were collected from the sow and connected her directly to Don's death. She was euthanized soon thereafter. Her cubs were left to fend for themselves, as wildlife officers believed they could survive, given their size and age. But a major question remained. What did they learn from their mother? Did they see her kill and consume Don? Local bear supporters were boisterous in their accusations against the sow's death. They claimed that killing her after she emerged from her den wasn't right, and leaving her cubs to fend for themselves was ensuring their death without her. Wildlife officials heard their objections, but decided on the matter based on their research and policy. After reviewing the facts surrounding Don's grizzly bear attack, I have a few questions for you. Do you think the sow emerged from her den in winter due to hunger and killed Don without her cubs witnessing any of it? Was Don running from the grizzly, or had she stalked him once he left his blind? What was Don shooting at, and why would he leave his rifle behind? Do you think it was fair for the wildlife officers to wait so long to kill the sow? I find this episode very interesting and mind-boggling. I'll be glad to read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.